If something should happen to you, what would happen to your farm? If the security and protection of your family and the passing of the farm to your loved ones is your dream, then you need a well-thought-out farm estate plan.
I'm Brad Swenson, president of Swenson Investments in Commodities in Sioux Falls and Huron. We're a family-owned company that helps farmers keep the family farm.
During our Farm Basics time today, we wanted to discuss shelter belts around fields. Why do they have trees around some fields?
Well, this is a good question. You think, man, trees, they're going to compete with the crop a little bit, and to some degree, they are. The roots for those trees are going to extend out into fields, and farmers may give up a little bit of yield right along those tree belts.
Well, beyond that, I mean, the seeds that end up out in the field, like this field that we're standing by, I couldn't believe how many volunteer trees are out there this year.
Well, there are quite a few of those, but really it comes down to what's the long-term benefit and what's the best thing for the environment. And for many farmers, their dads or their granddads were farming back in the 30s when we had just terrible dust storms and lots of wind erosion of our soil. And back in those days, the best natural defense that farmers could think about was planting some tree belts around the ends of the fields. And by putting those tree belts there, it slows that wind down, it protects the soil in the field, and also it's good for many other things like wildlife as well. If you drive by tree belts in our part of the world, you may find deer in them or pheasants or lots of different animals.
There's two ways to look at that thing. Honestly, I really don't want deer or pheasants by my field because they eat all my corn. We have one field that has about 10% of the corn wiped out every year because there's too much wildlife. So there's a limit to that whole thing. It just depends on why you want to farm.
You can get a hunting license, Brian. That's just fine.
And I have one.
But the question is, why are there shelter belts around many farm places and also around many fields? And it's not just in the United States that farmers have figured this out. We've also seen this as we've traveled around the world. Brian and I were in Ukraine a few years ago, and we were noticing that, boy, around a lot of the fields, there's trees on the borders. And, you know, back in the old Soviet Union days, when they had dust blowing in fields, well, the government just said, plant trees in the fence lines, and everybody did it. I just don't know why they would do that, Brian, but they listened to the government in those days.
No, they listened to the dictator. That's the way it goes. Well, the other thing that they did in Ukraine is they planted trees right alongside the roads. I couldn't believe as we're driving down these roads, literally 90 or 100 miles an hour because they drive really fast in Ukraine, and it's trees along each side. And I mean, around here, you wouldn't want to do that. There could be deer jumping across the roads. Who knows? But the reason why they did that is because back probably 40, 50 years ago, when we were first getting satellite technology in the United States, the Soviet Union was worried that we could see their truck movements, their army movements and such. And if they had trees planted alongside the roads, then that to some degree hid all the movement of vehicles.
Well, I think when you're driving around the country in the United States and you see tree belts around fields, you're not thinking about military purposes. You're thinking about protecting the soil from erosion in those fields.
But the reason why this is not as important in the year 2010 as it was back in the 1930s is today farmers are using practices like no-till and strip-till, leaving more plant residue out in the field in the fall, the winter, and the spring. So it holds soil in place, and the amount of soil erosion that's going to be reduced by tree belts, shelter belts, is not nearly as much as it used to be.
Well, erosion is a big concern for farmers. Protecting their fields from it is one of those reasons. That's why I see a lot of these great big tall trees right along the sides of fields. They've been there for decades to help protect that ground. One other thing that farmers will do to protect their fields is control weeds like our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?